Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our television and webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and viewers, we're very pleased that you're participating with us today. The Canadian Club is proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. It's a proud tradition that we have upheld for 120 years. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public figures from around the world. Our panelists today are a great example. Before I formally introduce them, here's a snapshot of a few of our upcoming events. Next Tuesday, January 24th, the Honourable Kevin Flynn, Ontario's Minister of Labour, will be our special guest. And on Wednesday, February the 8th, the President and CEO of Halifax-based Emera Inc., Chris Huskelson, will be at our podium to talk about the transformation of Emera from a regional electricity utility to a North American energy leader. You can order your tickets and review the club's full list of upcoming events at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter. Please follow us at CDNCLUBTO or simply use that hashtag. I'd also like to recognize the youth and young leaders who are with us today from Oakwood Collegiate, the Monk School of Public Policy, and Ryerson School of Public Policy. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Today, all eyes are on Washington, D.C. In less than 24 hours, perhaps the most controversial public figure in American history will be sworn into that nation's highest office. The coverage of political news here at home and around the globe is saturated with the travails and tweets of President-elect Donald Trump. What to make of what lies in store for the next 4 years, especially for Canada-U.S. relations? What does Canada need to do proactively to position ourselves with the 800-pound gorilla that is our closest trade and economic ally? Let's get the views of our strategists. Kathleen Monk is a senior communications and campaign strategist with over 15 years' experience in media, politics, and the nonprofit sector. As a principal, she provides senior counsel to clients at the Earnscliffe Strategy Group. David Herle is a principal partner with the Gandalf Group. For almost 2 decades, he's been considered a leader in public opinion research, strategy, and communications. Jaime is the executive chairman of Navigator Limited. He specializes in complex public strategy issues, serving both domestic and international clients. He's a trusted advisor to business leaders as well as political leaders at all 3 levels of government across Canada. All 3 panelists are well known to us for their insightful political analysis and commentary as the insiders on CBC's The National. We're pleased to have veteran broadcast journalist Don Newman as our moderator today. Don's currently a public affairs consultant, public speaker, event moderator, political commentator, and author. These sage politicals will gladly take your questions, which I'm sure you'll have many. So without much further ado, Don and panelists, welcome once again. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Fred, and good afternoon, everybody. It is very nice for all of us to be back here. I was thinking the last time I was here with you anyway was in the lead up to the 2015 federal election, and everybody made their predictions, and I have to say that 2 of them got it wrong. But today we're going to talk about Donald Trump and what he means for Canada. And we hope that we don't get it wrong, or that Donald Trump doesn't get it wrong, or that Canada doesn't get it wrong. So I want to ask, and Kathleen, why don't I start with you? And I'm going to ask you all the same question, and maybe a 1.5, 2-minute answer. Can Canada survive Donald Trump, or is Donald Trump going to be the worst thing for Canada-U.S. relations since the War of 1812?
Well, it's no coincidence that I'm wearing black today. I am in mourning at the end of Obama's term. But I guess the short answer is yes, Canada can survive, or at least I hope so. But I think there's an apt analogy that I'm going to borrow from a political strategist from the US, actually, about how we can survive under a Trump presidency. It was actually John Kasich's campaign manager, a guy by the name of John Weaver, who used this analogy when he was prepping during the Republican primaries for the debate with Donald Trump. If you recall, there were 17 different candidates at one point for that Republican primary. And John Weaver said, without actually naming Trump, preparing for this debate is like, pretend you're a NASCAR driver. You're getting on the track. You're going to go at incredible speeds. You're going to take sharp corners. It's going to be blinding. There's 17 of you in these cars racing in laps and laps. But the problem is, one of the drivers is drunk. Okay? And that's kind of what we have to prepare ourselves. I think it's an apt analogy for us as Canadians. We have to be mindful that there can be some erratic behavior, unpredictable behavior, but we also have to be flexible and we have to be prepared. And I think that we can survive if we do those three things.
Jamie, your thought on, I mean, I'm sure we'll be here as a country in 4 years, but surviving that way and surviving with a hostile American presidency.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure he's going to be hostile to us. I'm bullish on our ability to survive some of the otherwise difficulties of a Trump presidency. I'm horrified by a Trump presidency in every dimension and regard. But that said, I think we're going to be okay for two reasons. The first is we actually have more in common with Mr. Trump than might at first be the case. Both Mr. Trump and Mr. Trudeau campaigned on a platform of bettering the lives of the middle class. Canada is the #1 customer of 35 states in America. We have 11.9, almost $12 billion trade. They have a trade surplus with us. And so I think at the end of the day, Mr. Trump is going to find out that that we are their best friends, we are their allies, that our friends and neighbors and relatives live across the border from each other, and that the ties, business, economic, and otherwise, are deep. And I think he's going to go pick on other people. I think bullies are going to go pick on the weak link. I don't think we're the weak link. So I would be more worried if I was a Mexican than a Canadian. And I think there's more common ground for driving economic prosperity than there might first be. That's not that he won't do some symbolic things. But I think, generally speaking, we will survive a Trump presidency well because of that commonality. The second reason is because the government of Canada has already demonstrated a high degree of sophistication in dealing with Mr. Trump. The measures that have been taken by Mr. Butts and Ms. Telford and the Minister Freeland and the Prime Minister really show that they understand how to maneuver in such a way just to get Canada into a good position. They have done, it's a bit like an iceberg. They have done much more work than they would let on, as it should be. But I think they're setting us up to be very, very successful. Brian Clough going into the Prime Minister's office to supervise U.S.-Canadian relations across the entire government. So they're looking at this relationship in a way, Dawn, that they haven't before. So I think we're doing a good job, and I think that there's more commonality. Therefore, I think we're going to be fine.
So, David, pick up on Jamie's point. Are we well prepared, and is that going to help us survive the Trump presidency? Or once Trump gets going, it doesn't matter what you've done to prepare for him, because, as Kathleen said, there's a drunk driver at the wheel.
Well, I don't know. I mean, normally it would be my job to fluff up Jerry and Katie, but Jamie,
it's good to go first.
Already done that.
Now, I realized he knocked you off your game there for a minute, but
I'm waiting to hear. I'm waiting to hear a 2-minute answer from David Herle. That will be the accomplishment.
I clocked yours.
All right, well, let's take that on. I'll say we're going to be diminished in 3 ways by a Trump presidency. The first is protectionism. I don't think there's any doubt that there are going to be some constraints on trade and some additional costs on Canadian exporters to the United States, and we can talk a lot about how important and integrated the trade relationship is, but I still think that we are going to get caught, at least in some of the crossfire on that, in a very clear America First policy. Number 2 is policy sovereignty. If he starts going off in a dramatically different direction, for example, we are going to see how long we can sustain an aggressive fight against climate change in Canada without rendering ourselves uncompetitive with a country that is going exactly the opposite direction, right? And right now we're talking tough about that and bold about that, but the proof will be in the pudding in terms of competitiveness over time. And the third thing, and I haven't really heard that much talk about this, but to me it's really important, is Trump's attack on multilateralism around the world. So his belief that the United Nations is a useless debating club, his belief that NATO is outmoded and irrelevant in the current context. Canada survives in these and thrives and has influence through these multilateral organizations. I remember when I was working with Paul Martin and he was working to set up the G20, he said, I'm doing it because if we don't organize the party, there's no reason to believe we're going to be invited. And so the weaker those multilateral institutions are, the weaker Canada's influence is in global affairs. So I think for those 3 reasons, it will actually be a very difficult time for Canada.
And is there a chance, Kathleen, I want to get to the politics of it in a minute, but is there a chance, I mean, Mr. Trudeau has made a big point, first about organizing the government, as Jaime pointed out, in terms of trying to deal with Mr. Trump, but his other card, and on the other hand, is that he's trying to develop the relationship with China. And it seems to me that the one thing we've heard from the Trump cabinet confirmation hearings is China is a no-no to Mr. Trump and his administration, or is going to be. Are we likely to get caught in a crossfire while we're trying to develop better relations with China while Trump is painting them into a corner, if he can, as kind of an aggressor, and apparently Putin is going to be okay now the Chinese are the new Russians?
A couple things. Quickly, just to add on Jamie's point, the government has done some of that heavy lifting, and the one thing that you didn't mention was also and this happened months and months ago, well before the election of Trump, was the appointment of our ambassador in the U.S. So, and our ambassador to the U.S. actually was chosen with the idea that there was this contingency that this could potentially happen, and it actually has proven a really prescient move on behalf of the Prime Minister's office to choose him to be there, because he will be a guiding light not just for Canada and to help kind of smooth out the politics there, but will also actually probably be a guiding light to many other ambassadors who are trying to figure out their way in DC. On the China issue, I think Canada's done a smart move by putting someone who's got the ear of the Prime Minister by putting McCallum in China. That was a good move. But let's remember, as we watch the hearings going on, the confirmation hearings going on in the States for the last number of days, none of his chosen cabinet ministers actually agree with Trump on Putin. None of them. So we are seeing a lot of differentiation there between the president's views and his cabinet picks. So that's important to note. China, there's some major issues that will arise, but I think in terms of opportunities, it could be beneficial to Canada. And remember, it's not all doom and gloom. If NAFTA is ripped up within the first 100 days, which has certainly been the stated goal of the new president to do so, the assumption is that we will fall back on the free trade agreement. And that has tariffs that are more around 2 to 3%, not like the 35% that is being quoted. But anything's possible, I guess.
So just briefly, Jaime, on China, is if Trudeau warms up relations with China, is he likely to anger Donald Trump?
Well, this is one of the very interesting questions. As people will know, the government's made a massive and is making a massive bet on China. I mean, they really feel that this is our opportunity, and I think they look at the previous government and its view on China as a failed, seriously failed policy, and they're they're looking at China as a way of delivering the economic growth that they need to pay the bills for the crazy money that they're spending. So I think the question then becomes, what is Trump's response? Like, what is Trump's elasticity or tolerance for people not doing things his way? And that's really one of the unknown issues at the moment. So if he has one view on China and we have another, is he cool with that? Or does he decide he's going to punish us for that? And that we don't really understand yet. And I actually don't think Mr. Trump has thought very much about many of these issues, because I don't think Mr. Trump actually thought he was going to win.
No.
And I think if you watch Vice President-elect Pence, when he introduced him on election night, he sure didn't think they were going to win. In fact, it was like, it reminded me of when I was young and I got a science, one of those kits you could do all kinds of different science experiments in, and my parents said you could only do the first 5, and I did the more advanced one, and I blew up the whole garage. It was like Pence sort of said, we weren't supposed to win. So I actually think that we have to be careful how much we read into a lot of what Trump says, because he actually hasn't thought about it. He actually hasn't considered it. He is not a public policy brain. After all, he's sitting at a desk pretending. I mean, he's a fake president. He was sitting at a desk pretending to write his inauguration speech, and it turns out it's the receptionist's desk at a golf club. And he doesn't think he's going to be busted on this in 5 minutes. So I don't think a lot of the things that he spews, and David knows this from advising Prime Minister Martin, the view of the world from one side of the Prime Minister President's desk is very different than the view of the world when you're sitting at that desk. So I'm just chilling out a little bit on this and hoping that things will be okay.
David, Trump, we think he will have a very unusual presidency because he ran a very unusual campaign. But political strategies and campaigns tend to follow from the United States into Canada within about 4 to 5 years. Right. Do you think, and I'm going to ask all three of you because you all have worked inside campaigns, do you think that the way Trump campaigned, or at least parts of the way he campaigns, and even the way he conducts himself now with his own tweets rather than someone tweeting in his name, do you think that that is going to emigrate north and that we are going to be seeing a lot of Trumpisms in Canadian politics?
Yes, some, for sure. Not all of them. It's not all easily transferable. I think that, first of all, his campaign demonstrated pretty conclusively the decline of the authority of news media, of traditional news media, and that is, I think, as true here as it is there. First of all you have to do is look at the reach, how the reach has diminished, the fewer eyeballs on newspapers or on television news programs. And second of all, what social media has done to enhance and facilitate peer-to-peer recommendations and information which are proving to be more authoritative than the old editorial function of news media, which told us, if not what to think, certainly what to think about, what was important, and what we needed to be considering. So that's true, and I think all campaigns in Canada going forward are going to try to use that lesson. I think the other thing that is clearly true is that economic change is driving political change, and that's true here as well. I think in the federal election we actually saw a bit of that, but we saw that economic anxiety harnessed perhaps in a more positive way, and perhaps it's not as severe here as it is in parts of the United States, but nonetheless that is happening here. And you only have to look at, for instance, what's happened to provincial party support in places like Southwest Ontario, which used to be a Liberal bastion and now is a Liberal wasteland, because the industrial sector is hollowed out there, and that economic change is driving political change. What I don't think is going to come up to Canada, first of all, I don't think it is going to be acceptable in our country to ignore social norms and mores the way he did. I don't think the kind of insulting, demeaning, diminishing discourse is going to play in Canada. And the second thing is I think that if you're looking at his lack of money, lack of organization, lack of traditional campaign apparatus, I think a lot of that's pretty unique to him and who he was and the stature that he had going into it. I don't think many other candidates would be able to replicate that. So I still think we're going to see TV advertising and other forms of advertising and emphasis on the-ground organization and campaigns, despite the fact that he won without it.
But don't underestimate a candidate's ability to over-apply the Trump lessons now here in Canada. Like, there will be candidates in the next election saying, I don't need to fundraise, Trump didn't. I don't need to organize, Trump didn't. I just need to tweet a lot. And that would actually be a mistake. But people will try to do that. I think that, politics constantly changes. Election campaigns and campaign strategies are constantly evolving. I would argue probably that they are changing or evolving exponentially now, a lot quicker than they used to. So is the question then, did Trump change how we campaign, or is it in fact the nature of our connectivity that we have today and our 24/7 connectivity and social media? Is that what is changing and driving the change in politics? I think that I would argue that Trump was certainly the first candidate, more so than Obama in 2008, which was hailed as a digital campaign, and certainly the 2012 Obama campaign had many advances in digital campaigning. But I would say that it's been Trump who has really been able to seize on the power of social media to kind of drive these divisions that he used in his campaign. But all presidents do this kind of stuff. Like, don't forget Ronald Reagan built a TV studio in the White House, right? So that he could leapfrog over national domestic media like the NBCs and the ABCs of the world and go directly to the local markets. The same phenomenon happened here, you could argue, in Canada with Stephen Harper, with him leapfrogging the National Parliamentary Press Gallery and going to regional, or what we term like ethnic media, more community media. So these kind of changes always happen. It's just, I think it's really, you really have to be cautious about over applying the lessons of Trump, because as David says, he's a very unique candidate.
So Jaime, if you think about the current Conservative leadership race, and you think of the most recent entrant, who would be sort of Donald Trump light, if do you think that we are going to see a kind of Trump campaign that maybe he can't replicate it because he's not as rich and it's not the same country, but we are going to now see some of that here?
Well, I'm always leery of taking...
Of O'Leary.
Pun intended. I'm always leery of applying too many American learnings to Canada. We seem to be the same people, but we're not. Some people say the difference between us is guns, gays, Medicare, and Quebec. I actually think the difference between America and Canada is by the yogurt in the morning that you get. You get the little tin foil on the top of your yogurt. In Canada, it says best before, mieux avant, right? Both our languages, public health warning. You know what it says in America? Sell by. We don't give a damn when you eat it, but get it the hell out of the store. So I think we speak a common language, but we're very different people. So I am leery about applying too many examples for all kinds of reasons, including technical reasons, that we have a multi-party system, they don't, and so on. But one thing that caught my eye, you may have seen it as well, and it's not David's polling firm, so I'm sure it's not nearly as reliable, but a little upstart pollster, Ipsos, had a poll out recently, and they said 70% of the Canadians were not pleased with Mr. Trump. Okay. In other news, water is wet. The same poll found 77% of Canadians would consider a Trump-like platform. So if that's close to being right, it may well mean that there is an appetite for a different kind of platform and a different kind of politics. And as much as I would look at the tactics that we might learn from, I think also there's a message there if that number is even close to being right.
Well, I'm going to move to some of the questions from the audience. And David, just following on that theme, I have a question here that says, how do you believe a Trump presidency will affect the current Conservative Party leadership race? And how does it affect the candidates' policy positions?
Well, I mean, I to the extent that the O'Leary candidacy is probably inspired by the Trump candidacy to some measure, it's already had a huge impact on the Conservative race, because I think it's likely that he's the front runner in that race, despite just having joined it yesterday. It's had that impact. It's obvious that the Leach campaign has seen the ways in which violating traditional political correctness and employing pretty stark wedge politics can take a candidate from zero to somewhere, and create a viable candidacy out of something that probably wouldn't have been viable. I mean, as a Liberal, I'm hoping they learn too many lessons, because I don't think that the mood is the same in Canada as it is in the United States. There was a poll. I'm not going to cite Ipsos because they're still enjoying the Hudak premiership here in Ontario. But the Wall Street Journal and NBC did a poll about 6 months ago where they asked people in the States, would you prefer a candidate who was a competent, reliable administrator of the status quo, or would you prefer a candidate that represented dramatic change, even if you had no idea what that change would be? And a majority of Americans said, I'll take the change and take my chances. And that tells you what the mindset of that country is, and I don't think Canada's in that same place. So I think the Conservatives would be wiser to stick closer to the mainstream than a Trump candidacy might inspire them to do.
Kathleen, just pick up on that. Do you think, I mean, Ms. Leach has got her name recognized. I'm not sure what else that poll really tells us, except that people kind of knew her from the election campaign and the tip line, and now she's going to interview everybody, make sure they're a Canadian. But now that O'Leary is in the race, do you think that that will change the race also, in that other candidates will feel that they have to be more like O'Leary? Although it's hard to imagine anybody being like O'Leary, but do you think that that changes the race?
Yeah, so I think that Kelly Leach's strategy has been an earned media one, right? Like, she's been very effective at kind of getting out and having these really outrageous policies, her 3 policies, one of which includes having pepper spray given out to every woman, so she can get that media and get her name recognition up. Because beyond the barbaric cultural practices line, I don't think she was really well known at all. In terms of O'Leary, I think he's going to be a case of the lessons from Trump being over-applied. I think actually the better analogy is if you move over to Alberta and you look at Jason Kenney and the kind of gaslighting that he's also doing, I would argue, in regards to the new Democratic government there. So gaslighting is, we've learned lots of words, right? With Trump, we can all agree on that. The komprikot, or whatever, I can't actually do the Russian pronunciation of that. We've learned about golden showers and bragalicious, and bigly is another word that we learned. And gaslighting is a term, along with fake news, that has been used a lot more in the last few years. I won't go into what gaslighting means. I'm sure most of you know, but I think that Jason Kenney, in many ways, is importing some of those tactics that Trump did in terms of divisiveness and the gaslighting and the challenging of policies that really aren't based on fact, more so than what I'm seeing so far, at least in the Conservative leadership.
If I could, Don, it's definitely going to force the other candidates into more extreme positions, because O'Leary is going to suck up all of the oxygen out of that race, all of the airtime. How is Stephen Blaney going to get into the news? So you're forced into saying more and more extreme things in order to get that. I have a memory that I'll never forget, which is late in the 1990 leadership campaign, when it was evident that Mr. Chrétien was going to beat Paul Martin. And so the media had stopped covering the race. Mike Robinson, who was Paul's campaign manager, is on the phone with Ellie Elboim, who's the bureau chief of the CBC News. And he's saying, if Paul said this today, would he get on the National? And Ellie says, no. Well, what if he said this? Would he get on the National? Ellie says, no. And Mike says, what do we have to say to get on the National? Right? And that is where all the other candidates but O'Leary are going to be right now, which is, what do I have to say, and how sharply do I have to say it to merit any attention in this race?
Do you think that Lisa Raitt, by starting this website, it didn't seem to go anywhere, but maybe it will now that O'Leary's in the race. Her Stop Kevin O'Leary website, does she put herself up now as the counterpoint to Kevin O'Leary, and is this in a way going to help her campaign?
I have a lot of time for Lisa Raitt. I think she's a very interesting candidate who, to date, has significantly underperformed her potential for reasons that are not immediately apparent to me. And I think if you actually just look at her life story, her experience, and so on, her ability, she's a very attractive candidate who, partly through her own inability to get her campaign into sharp focus and relief, and also because of the difficulty that David said, is that no one's paying attention to this campaign of the 101 Dalmatians. She's really suffered from that. Now, I didn't see the French debate, but apparently she's had some kind of a makeover.
Yeah.
She looked better, I'm told. So maybe she's going to get that together. She is for those who know her, she's a very competent, sensible Cape Breton woman. And she may well be able to break out of the paradigm that David discussed, and that is claim that reasonable middle ground, be the adult in the room, and not be forced into ridiculous positions. Now, I say that as a charter member, a proud charter member of the Laurentian elite, so I don't really understand a lot of these people. I'm not the best one to be asked about that.
Another question from the audience. Do you think the appointment of Chrystia Freeland as the foreign minister is appropriate to deal with Trump and the U.S., given her emotional reaction to dealing with the Canada-EU trade talks? I think that, I'm trying to think of her emotional reaction. Was there an emotional?
Reported that she
teared up.
She teared up, yes.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you go first, and then Kathleen on this?
No.
Yeah, he doesn't want to talk about that.
No, sorry, but she'll be great.
Yeah, she'll be great.
She's fantastic. She is extremely well connected in circles in the United States that will do us very well, in circles internationally. She's sharp as a whip, understands all the issues. She'll do the country well, and I think that if she feels passionately about it from time to time and expresses that, that's not much of an issue.
She speaks multiple languages. She's one person away, one connection away from many of the people that are in Trump's cabinet. So she knows these players. She's worked with them before. And also Andrew Leslie has now appointed her, as of January 30th, her parliamentary secretary for foreign affairs. Will be, he's well liked and knows the defense community. Defense is one of the areas that potentially could, in terms of manufacturing, that could expand under Trump. Obviously with a Republican Congress, they'll be looking to kind of grow defense spending in the States, and that's one area of growth that Canada can look to. It's a very integrated industry, so that's a possibility too.
If you look at diplomats, the biggest predictor of the diplomat's success, and of course she is our diplomat-in-chief, the biggest predictor of a diplomat's success is the relationship the diplomat has to the first minister, to the prime minister or the president or whatever. Those are the ones that really excel at their jobs. And Minister Freeland has a very close relationship and trust with the prime minister. And that alone is a predictor of how well she will do. If you look over time, those we now call them Minister of Global Affairs, Foreign Ministers, Foreign Secretaries, External Affairs Ministers, whatever they've been called. The ones that perform best are the ones with the closest relationship to the top.
And she has a good network, as Kathleen says,
Yes.
too.
In addition to that.
Having lived in the United States and worked there as well.
It has the side benefit of being a nice FU to Putin.
Yes, yes. That is true. The other question, I suppose, with Andy Leslie is that he is a general, retired general, and there are two retired generals in Trump's cabinet. So they're all kind of generals together. I mean, I think that's really what got him in, is the fact he was in Afghanistan, and so were two of the members in Trump's cabinet.
Well,
His
one
nickname
wag
is
said
not
that.
Mad Dog, though, is it?
No. But it's not Nice Dog either.
So one wag said that Trump is appointing billionaires and generals to his cabinet. I want to know who our billionaire is.
We all do. Now here's a question, and Jaime, I think since you were the most optimistic, I'll start with you. It says, Wilbur Ross has already signaled the reopening of NAFTA. Are we being naive in Canada in thinking that we will be treated any differently?
Yeah, so my view is not that we won't have pain and not that there won't be difficulty. I just don't think it will be as my 2.5-year-old grandson is taken to running around and calling everything a disaster. Anything that happens, it's a disaster. And I just don't think it's going to be. And I don't think it's going to be because I think there are too many other forces at work that, notwithstanding the petulant satisfaction Mr. Trump might get from doing some of those things, he has 35 governors of 35 states who we are the #1 customer. Does he want them all pitching yurts on the back lawn of the White House, protesting that we're going to start fighting back? So I think that sure there'll be some disruption, sure there'll be some difficulty along the way, but I don't think it will be a disaster, and I don't think there's any evidence that his gun sights are trained on us as much as they are on other jurisdictions, specifically Mexico. And that's why my opening comments, I do think, I'm not a liberal, but I do think this Prime Minister and his office have been skillful in targeting this son-in-law, getting down there, making the case, that we're different. And I think we're going to be okay. Not great, but I think we're going to be okay.
Do you think there's going to be a big learning curve, though, with the Trump people? Because it was reported somewhere that the two things in NAFTA that Trump was concerned about in terms of Canada were the country of origin labeling and softwood lumber, neither of which is actually in NAFTA, and both of which we've won at the WTO and at the International Trade Court in the United States. It sounds to me like we may get bogged down in a lot of things that have already been resolved that don't really come under NAFTA at all.
I think one of the things to watch about Trump, Don, is that he's a businessman. And he's the first businessman to be the president of the United States that I can recall, and to come at it from that kind of experience. Now, this will probably upset some people in the room, but my experience with business people, especially business people who come from his type of sector of the economy, tend to be more transactional than strategic. And I think that he doesn't like Canada or dislike Canada, or like China or dislike China. I think that he looks at these things pragmatically from a deal standpoint. And if he thinks that the HST is a subsidy to Canadian business, which apparently he does, or if he thinks that China is manipulating the currency, it doesn't matter what the other relationship, he's going to approach that on not as part of a sweeping 20-year strategy for managing the globe, but on a deal-by-deal, transaction-by-transaction basis. So I don't think we should expect any exemptions here in Canada. I think we're going to have to argue right to him, the closer we can get to him, our case on every one of these. Things. And if we can't make a case that our policy is actually in the American interest, it doesn't matter whether it's in our interest, it doesn't matter whether it's fair. If it's not in their interest, we're going to lose.
Yeah. I would just add that, because he is transactional, as David points out, he will want some early wins. So, and that's why Wilbur Ross has said you can expect us to move in terms of sending out a letter in the first few days of President Trump's presidency. He said that at confirmation yesterday. But remember that governing, not that I've governed as a New Democrat, but federally, so close.
And yet.
Right.
And yet.
So close.
All that time measuring those drapes.
But I do know this about governing, that governing is hard. Yeah. And that despite all of the anxiety and all of the exuberance, and excitement that is existing right now about Trump's presidency, that stuff is going to go a lot slower than we all think it's going to happen. And I was talking to some lawyers from Washington yesterday and who have worked in the White House and who have worked in the Senate, and they were saying, and actually what's interesting is, I don't think this has been widely reported, but basically they have said that Trump has downloaded all of the domestic policy making to Pence. And so when one of these lawyers' friends was going over to be Pence's chief of staff for policy. But I say that because they were citing the fact everyone is talking about Obama's regulations on the environment and wanting to roll back these regulations. It's going to take as long to roll back these regulations as it did to put them in the first place. And so just remember that. There's only so much time on the floor of the Senate. There's only so much time for these elected officials to deal with that. So, it will happen. Some stuff will be fast because he is transactional. He'll want to have some drama. But governing is hard.
When Premier Ray was unexpectedly given a majority government, I remember Stephen Lewis saying that he learned more about government in 30 days of transition than he had in 30 years or something of public life. I remember when I walked in with my friends to Premier Harris's office after being in the third party, and all of a sudden sitting, with the responsibility of government. You have a lot of ideas that you held in good faith, not ideas that you or put forward to be manipulative or to never follow through on, that you thought you could do, and you get there and you find it's just not possible. There's that line of people with serious faces and briefcases, and they start telling you all these things, and they've got a lot of ideas that they can write a lot of letters, but I think it's going to go very much more slowly than we think, and we'll see where we are.
Well, panel, it may go more slowly than we think, but unfortunately time has gone faster than I thought it would, and so I have to bring this to a close. But thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, David. And please join me in thanking the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Simmons, and I have the pleasure of thanking formally the panel on behalf of the club. Roughly 9 years ago, a very different kind of political figure emerged within American politics, someone who turned a lot of heads and revived what had largely become a lost art. We had a political figure who was making hope and change cool again. As our strategists have told us, tomorrow, a very different political figure will ascend to the American presidency. And indeed, one of the unintended consequences of his emergence is that thoughtful analysis and insightful commentary are cool again. So, strategists, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Club, thank you for sharing your analysis, your insights, and your perspectives. I found today's conversation very stimulating, and I take away 3 important lessons. The first, Katie and Jerry are super cool. The second is that we shouldn't over-apply lessons from the Trump campaign. And the third is that if we're measured, if we're thoughtful, if we're fair, and if we're reasonable, we're going to be okay. To Don Newman, the Dean of Public Affairs, thank you for keeping this cast of characters together. We know it's no easy task. We appreciate your time. You, like President Obama, can drop the mic. Once again, let me thank you all for your attendance here today. Let me also thank Rogers TV and 680 News for their continuing promotion of the Canadian Club. We'd like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. And to the Toronto Convention Centre and your staff, thank you for having us. To learn more about the club, visit us at canadianclub.org. Thank you for joining us. Today's meeting is now adjourned.